And good evening, everyone. We are just about ready to get going. I'm still putting out my social media information. Alright, good. Stream is up. How is everyone tonight? Just as a reminder, we're on chapter 12 tonight. Alright. Put that out. And we'll put this out over here. And put this out over here. And put this over here. And yeah, so I hope everybody's having a good night. Do another one over here. Yeah, I have to wait a few minutes there. Go over here. And back over here. Alrighty. So I think we're getting there. So we're about the halfway point in the story tonight. We'll definitely hit the halfway point. There's 24 chapters. We're starting chapter 12, so that'll be good. And check. Making sure everything's good levels-wise. Let me see here. Open up my drink just in case I need one while I'm reading. During the chat portion of the evening, I'll show you a little bit of some of the new stuff we got going on, so that's cool. Alright. Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Discord. I think we're good. Alright. Oh, gotta hit record. That would be a problem. There we go. And okay. So, as always, I'd like you to sit back, relax, just chill out and enjoy the story. switch scenes here. Okay, so previously in Chapter 11 of Tom Swift and His Motorcycle, Tom ran into a tramp, is what they're calling him, whose name is Happy Harry. And he doesn't quite seem to be the tramp that he's portraying himself as. So we'll see. We'll see how that turns out. And, no, that's fine. We will go Chapter 11. Mike, you know what to do. Chapter 12, The Men in the Auto. Tom first made sure that the package containing the model was still safely in place back of his saddle on the motorcycle. Finding it there, he next put his hand in his pocket to see that he had the papers. "They're all right," spoke Tom aloud. "I didn't know but what that chap might have worked a pickpocket game on me. I'm glad I didn't meet him after dark. Well, it's a good thing it's no worse. I wonder if he tried to get my machine away from me. Don't believe he'd know how to ride it if he did." Tom wheeled his motorcycle to a hard side path along the old road and jumped into the saddle. He worked the pedals preparatory to turning on the gasoline and spark to set the motor in motion. As he threw forward the levers, having acquired what he thought was the necessary momentum, he was surprised that no explosion followed. The motor seemed dead. "That's queer," he thought, and he began to pedal more rapidly. "It always used to start easily. Maybe it doesn't like the sandy road." It was hard work sending the heavy machine along by leg power, and once more, when he had acquired what he thought was sufficient speed, Tom turned on the power. But no explosions followed, and in some alarm he jumped to the ground. "Something's wrong," he said aloud. "That tramp must have damaged the machine when he yanked it so." Tom went quickly over the different parts. It did not take him long to discover what the trouble was. One of the wires leading from the batteries to the motor, which wire served to carry the current of electricity that exploded the mixture of air and gasoline, was missing. It had been broken off close to the battery box and the spark plug. "Oh, that's what Happy Harry did," exclaimed Tom. "He pulled that wire off when he yanked my machine. That's what he meant by hoping I'd get to Albany. That fellow was no tramp. He was disguised and up to some game. And he knows something about motorcycles, too, or he never would have taken that wire. I'm stalled now, for I haven't got another piece. I ought to have brought some. I'll have to push this machine until I get to town, or else go back home." The young inventor looked up and down the lonely road, undecided what to do. To return home meant that he would be delayed in getting to Albany, for he would lose a day. And if he pushed on to Pompville, he might be able to get a bit of wire there. Tom decided that that was his best plan, and plodded on through the thick sand. He had not gone more than a quarter of a mile, every step seeming harder than the preceding one, when he heard, from the woods close at his left hand, a gun fired. He jumped so that he nearly let the motorcycle fall over, for a wild idea came into his head that the tramp had shot at him. With a quickly beating heart, the lad looked about him. "I wonder if that was Happy Harry," he mused. There was a crackling in the bushes, and Tom, wondering what he might do to protect himself, looked toward the place whence the noise proceeded. Wow, that is some old-timey language right there. He looked toward the place whence the noise proceeded. He just means he looked to see where the noise came from, or towards where the noise came from. A moment later, a hunter stepped into view. The man carried a gun and wore a canvas suit, a belt about his waist being filled with cartridges. "Hello," he exclaimed pleasantly. Then, seeing a look of alarm on the lad's face, he went on. "I hope I didn't shoot in your direction, young man, did I?" "No, sir," replied the youthful inventor, who had hardly recovered his composure. "I heard your gun, and I imagined—" "Did you think you'd been shot? You must have a very vivid imagination, for I fired in the air." "No, I didn't exactly think that," replied Tom, "but I just had an encounter with an ugly tramp, and I feared he might be using me for a target." "Is that so? I hadn't noticed any tramps around here, and I've been in these woods nearly all day. Did he harm you?" "No, not me, but my motorcycle," and the lad explained. "Phew, that's too bad," exclaimed the hunter. "I wish I could supply you with a bit of wire, but I haven't any. I'm just walking about trying my new gun." "I shouldn't think you'd find anything to shoot this time of year," remarked Tom. "I don't expect to," answered the hunter, who had introduced himself as Theodore Duncan. "But I just have purchased a new gun, and I wanted to try it. I expect to do considerable hunting this fall, and so I'm getting ready for it." "Do you live near here?" "Well, about 10 miles away on the other side of Lake Carlopa, but I'm fond of long walks in the woods. If you ever get to Waterford, I wish you'd come and see me, Mr. Swift. I have heard of your father." "I will, Mr. Duncan, but if I don't get something to repair my machine with, I'm not likely to get anywhere right away." "Well, I wish I could help you, but I haven't the least ingenuity when it comes to machinery. Now, if I could help you track down that tramp—" "Oh, no, thank you. I'd rather not have anything more to do with him." "If I caught sight of him now," resumed the hunter, "I fancy I could make him halt and perhaps give you back the wire. I'm a pretty good shot, even if this is a new gun. I've been practicing at improvised targets all day." "No, the less I have to do with him, the better I shall like it," answered Tom. "Though I'm much obliged to you. I'll manage somehow until I get to Pompville." He started off again, the hunter disappearing in the woods whence the sound of his gun was again heard. "He's a queer chap," murmured Tom, "but I like him. Perhaps I may see him when I go to Waterford, if I ever do." Tom was destined to see the hunter again at no distant time and under strange circumstances, but now the lad's whole attention was taken up with the difficulty in which he found himself. Vainly musing on what object the tramp could have had in breaking off the wire, the young inventor trudged on. "I guess he was one of the gang after Dad's invention," thought Tom. "And he must have wanted to hinder me from getting to Albany, though why I can't imagine." With a dubious shake of his head, Tom proceeded. It was hard work pushing the heavy machine through the sand, and he was puffing before he had gone very far. "I certainly am up against it," he murmured, "but if I can get a bit of wire in Pompville, I'll be all right. If I can't—" Just then, Tom saw something which caused him to utter an exclamation of delight. "That's the very thing!" he cried. "Why didn't I think about it before?" Leaving his motorcycle standing against a tree, Tom hurried to a fence that separated the road from a field. The fence was a barbed-wired one, and in a moment Tom had found a broken strand. "Guess no one will care if I take a piece of this," he reasoned. "It'll answer until I can get more. I'll have it in place in a jiffy." It did not take long to get his pliers from his tool bag and snip off a piece of the wire. Untwisting it, he took out the sharp barbs, and then was ready to attach it to the binding posts of the battery box and the spark plug. "Hold on, though," he exclaimed as he paused in the work. "It's gotta be insulated, or it'll vibrate against the metal of the machine and short-circuit. I have it! My handkerchief! I suppose Mrs. Baggert will kick at tearing up a good one, but I can't help it." Tom took a spare handkerchief from the bundle in which he had a few belongings carried with the idea of spending the night in an Albany hotel, and he was soon wrapping strips of linen around the wire, tying them with pieces of string. "There," he exclaimed at length. That's insulated. Good enough, I guess. Now to fasten it on and start." The young inventor, who was quick with tools, soon had the improvised wire in place. He tested the spark and found that it was almost as good as when the regular copper conductor was in place. Then, having taken a spare bit of the barbed wire along in case of another emergency, he jumped on the motorcycle, pedaled it until sufficient speed was attained, and turned on the power. "That's the stuff," he cried as the welcome explosion sounded. "I guess I've fooled Happy Harry. I'll get to Albany pretty nearly on time anyhow. But that tramp surely had me worried for a while." He rode into Pompville, and on inquiring in a plumbing shop managed to get a bit of copper wire that answered better than he did the galvanized piece from the fence. The readjustment was quickly made, and he was on his way again. As it was getting close to noon, he stopped near a little spring outside of Pompville and ate a sandwich, washing it down with cold water. Then he started for Centerford. As he was coming into the city, he heard an automobile behind him. He steered to one side of the road to give the big car plenty of room to pass, but it did not come on as speedily as he thought it would. He looked back and saw that it was going to stop near him. Accordingly, he shut off the power of his machine. "Is this the road to Centerford?" asked one of the travelers in the auto. "Straight ahead," answered the lad. At the sound of his voice, one of the men in the big touring car leaned forward and whispered something to one on the front seat. The second man nodded and looked closely at Tom. The youth, in turn, stared at the men. He could not distinguish their faces as they had on auto goggles. It must have been a convertible. "How many miles is it?" asked the man who had whispered, and at the sound of his voice, Tom felt a vague sense that he had heard it before. "3," answered the young inventor, and once more he saw the men whisper among themselves. "Thanks," spoke the driver of the car, and he threw in the gears. As the big machine darted ahead, the goggles which one of the men wore slipped off. Tom had a glimpse of his face. "Anson Morse!" he exclaimed. "If that isn't the man who was sneaking around Dad's motor shop, he's his twin brother. I wonder if those aren't the men who were after the patent model. I must be on my guard." And Tom, watching the car fade out of sight on the road ahead of him, slowly started his motorcycle. He was much puzzled and alarmed. End of chapter 12. So let's check in with the chat room over here. And we will put you back over here. Hope everybody's enjoying themselves tonight. And thank you again for joining me. I really do appreciate it. And if you have any suggestions or comments, you can go ahead and leave them in the suggestion box down below in the stream. Otherwise, go ahead and give me a follow if you wouldn't mind. That would be great. And then you'll know next time I start reading again. Okay, I'm going to do a quick check over here. All right. And we'll flip back over. I'm going to take a drink, though. We'll flip back over. Previously on Chapter 12 of Tom Swift and His Motorcycle. Well, Tom found out that Happy Harry, the disguised tramp, apparently tore a wire off his motorcycle, which caused it not to work. But Tom, being the ingenious sort, found a piece of wire in an old barbed wire fence and used it to kind of give a makeshift wire to get his motorcycle into town. He then saw a car come up behind him, and it turned out to be one of the guys that was sneaking around the workshop. And that's where we start. Chapter 13. Caught in a Storm. The more Tom tried to reason out the cause of the men's actions, the more he dwelt upon his encounter with the tramp, and the harder he endeavored to seek a solution of the queer puzzle, the more complicated it seemed. He rode on until he saw a valley below him. In a valley below him, the buildings of the sound of Tenterford, of course, the town of Centerford, and with a view of them, a new idea came to his mind. "I'll go get a good dinner," he decided, "and perhaps that will help me to think more clearly. That's what Dad always does when he's puzzling over an invention." He was soon seated in a restaurant where he ate a substantial dinner. "I'm just going to stop puzzling over this matter," he decided. "I'll push on to Albany and tell the lawyer, Mr. Crawford. Perhaps he can advise me." Once this decision was made, Tom felt better. "That's just what I needed," he thought. "Someone to shift the responsibility upon. I'll let the lawyers do the worrying. That's what they're paid for. Now for Albany, and I hope I don't have to stop except for supper until I get there. I've got to do some night riding, but I've got a powerful lamp, and the roads from now on are good." Tom was soon on his way again. The highway leading to Albany was a hard macadam one, and he fairly flew along the level stretches. "This is making good time," he thought. I won't be so very late after all, that is, if nothing delays me." The young inventor looked up into the sky. The sun, which had been shining brightly all day, was now hidden behind a mass of hazy clouds, for which the rider was duly grateful, and it was becoming quite warm. "It's more like summer than I thought," said Tom to himself. "I shouldn't be surprised if we got rain tomorrow." Another look at the sky confirmed him in this belief, and he had not gone on many miles farther when his opinion was suddenly changed. This was brought about by a dull rumble in the west, and Tom noticed that a bank of low-lying clouds had formed, the black, inky masses of vapor being whirled upward as if by some powerful blast. "Guess my storm is going to arrive ahead of time," he said. "I better look for shelter." With the suddenness that characterizes summer showers, the whole sky became overcast. The thunder increased, and the flashes of lightning became more frequent and dazzling. A wind sprang up and blew clouds of dust in Tom's face. "Certainly is going to be a thunderstorm," he admitted. "I'm bound to be delayed now, for the roads will be mucky. Well, there's no help for it. If I get to Albany before midnight, I'll be doing well." A few drops of rain splashed on his hands, and as he looked up to note the state of the sky, others fell in his face. They were big drops, and where they splashed on the road, they formed little globules of mud. "I'll head for that big tree," thought Tom. "It'll give me some shelter. I'll wait there." His words were interrupted by a deafening crash of thunder, which followed closely after a blinding flash. "No tree for mine," murmured Tom. "I forgot that they're dangerous in a storm. I wonder where I can stay." He turned on all the power possible and sprinted ahead. Around a curve in the road he went, leaning over to preserve his balance, and just as the rain came pelting down in a torrent, he saw ahead of him a white church on the lonely country road. To one side was a long shed where the farmers were in the habit of leaving their teams when they came to service. "Just the thing," cried the boy, "and just in time." He turned his motorcycle into the yard surrounding the church, and a moment later had come to a stop beneath the shed. It was broad and long, furnishing a good protection against the storm, which had now burst in all its fury. Tom was not very wet, and looking to see that the model, which was partly of wood, had suffered no damage, the lad gave his attention to his machine. "Seems to be all right," he murmured. "I'll just oil her up while I'm waiting. This can't last long. It's raining too hard." He busied himself over the motorcycle, adjusting a nut that had rattled loose and putting some oil on the bearings. The rain kept up steadily, and when he had completed his attentions to his machine, Tom looked out from under the protection of the shed. "It certainly is coming down for keeps," he murmured. "This trip is a regular hoodoo so far. I hope I have it better coming back." As he looked down the road, he espied an automobile coming through the mist of rain. It was an open car, and as he saw the 3 men in it huddled up under the insufficient protection of some blankets, Tom said, "They ought to come in here. There's lots of room. Maybe they don't see it. I'll call to them." The car was almost opposite the shed, which was close to the roadside. Tom was about to call when one of the men in the auto looked up. He saw the shelter and spoke to the chauffeur. The latter was preparing to steer up into the shed when the 2 men on the rear seat caught sight of Tom. "Why, that's the same car that passed me a while ago," said the young inventor half aloud. "The one that contained those men whom I suspected might be after Dad's patent. I hope they—" He did not finish his sentence, for at that instant the chauffeur quickly swung the machine around and headed back into the road. Clearly, the men were not going to take advantage of the shelter of the shed. "That's mighty strange," murmured Tom. "They certainly saw me, and as soon as they did, they turned away. Can they be afraid of me?" He went to the edge of the shelter and peered out. The auto had disappeared down the road behind a veil of rain, and, shaking his head over the strange occurrence, Tom went back to where he had left the motorcycle. "Things are getting more and more muddled," he said. "I'm sure those were the same men, and yet—" He shrugged his shoulders. The puzzle was getting beyond him. And that's the end of Chapter 13. And we will go back to this view. And once again, hope everybody's enjoying their time listening tonight. Got some folks in the chat room. How y'all doing tonight? I appreciate you being around. And just checking things out here. If you do have any suggestions about anything, go ahead and leave them in the suggestion box down below if you're watching on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and leave a comment in the comments below. We're about halfway through the book, and we'll continue on. Previously on Tom Swift and His Motorcycle, Chapter 13. Well, basically, Tom got the motorcycle going again and got to town and got some more wire that was most appropriate for the motorcycle. And he started on his way and got caught in a rainstorm. But the guys that were in the automobile were suspicious. Suspicious looking, anyway. And they saw him once Tom finally got to some shelter after the rain and ended up driving away rather than staying for some shelter. So we'll see what happened. Chapter 14. Attacked from Behind. Steadily, the rain came down, the wind driving it under the shed until Tom was hard put to find a place where the drops would not reach him. He withdrew into a far corner, taking his motorcycle with him, and then sitting on a block of wood under the rough mangers where the horses were fed while the farmers attended church, the lad thought over the situation. He could make little of it, and the more he tried, the worse it seemed to become. He looked out across the wet landscape. "I wonder if this is ever going to stop," he mused. "It looks as if it was in for an all-day pour, yet we ought only have a summer shower by rights. But then I guess what I think about it won't influence the weatherman a bit. I might as well make myself comfortable, for I can't do anything. Let's see. If I get to Fordham by 6 o'clock, I ought to be able to make Albany by 9, as it's only 40 miles. So that's 3 hours to go 40 miles. I mean, that's not nearly as fast as we're used to nowadays, right? I'll get supper in Fordham and push on. That is, I will if the rain stops. That was the most necessary matter to have happen first, and Tom, arising from his seat, strolled over to the front shed to look out. I believe it is getting lighter in the west, he told himself. Yes, the clouds are lifting. It's going to clear. It's only a summer shower after all. But just as he said that, there came a sudden squall of wind and rain, fiercer than any which had preceded. Tom was driven back to his seat on the log. It was quite chilly now, and he noticed that near where he sat there was a big opening in the rear of the shed where a couple of boards were off. This must be a drafty place in the winter, he observed. If I could find a drier spot, I'd sit there, but this seems to be the best. And he remained there, musing on many things. Suddenly, in the midst of his thoughts, he imagined he had heard the sound of an automobile approaching. I wonder if those men are coming back here, he exclaimed. If they are... The youth again arose and went to the front of the shed. He could see nothing and came back to escape the rain. There was no doubt but that the shower would soon be over, and looking at his watch, Tom began to calculate when he might arrive in Albany. He was busy trying to figure out the best plan to pursue and was hardly conscious of his surroundings. Seated on the log, with his back to the opening in the shed, the young inventor could not see a figure stealthily creeping up through the wet grass. Nor could he see an automobile, which had come to a stop back of the horse shelter. An automobile containing 2 rain-soaked men who were anxiously watching the one stealing through the grass. Tom put his watch back in his pocket and looked out into the storm. It was almost over. The sun was trying to shine through the clouds, and only a few drops were falling. The youth stretched with a yawn, for he was tired of sitting still. At the moment when he raised his arms to relieve his muscles, something was thrust through the opening behind him. It was a long club, and an instant later it descended on the lad's head. He went down in a heap, limp and motionless. Through the opening leaped a man. He bent over Tom, looked anxiously at him, and then, stepping to the place where the boards were off the shed, he motioned to the men in the automobile. They hurried from the machine and were soon beside their companion. I knocked him out all right, observed the man who had reached through and dealt Tom the blow with the club. Knocked him out? I should say you did, Featherton, exclaimed the one who appeared better dressed than the others. Have you killed him? No, but I wish you wouldn't mention my name, Mr. Appleson. I don't like... Nonsense, Featherton. No one can hear us, but I'm afraid you've done for the chap. I didn't want him harmed. Oh, I guess Featherton knows how to do it, Appleson, commented the third man. He's had the experience way, eh, Featherton? Yes, Mr. Morse, but if you please, I wish you wouldn't mention... All right, Featherton, I know what you mean, rejoined the man addressed as Morse. Now let's see if we have drawn a blank or not. I think he has with him the very thing we want. Doesn't seem to be about his person, observed Appleson, as he carefully felt about the clothing of the unfortunate Tom. Very likely not. It's too bulky. But there's his motorcycle over there. It looks as if what we wanted was on the back of the saddle. Jove, Featherton. But I think he's coming too. Tom stirred uneasily and moved his arms while a moan came from his parted lips. I got some stuff that'll fix him, exclaimed the man addressed as Featherton, and who had been operating the automobile. He took something from his pocket and leaned over Tom. In a moment, the young inventor was still again. Quick now. See if it's there, directed Morse, and Appleson hurried over to the machine. Here it is, he called. I'll take it to our car and we can get away. Are you going to leave him like this? Asked Morse. Yes, why not? Because someone might have seen him come in here, and also remember that we too came in this direction. What'd you do? Take him down the road away and leave him. We can find some shed near a farmhouse where he and his machine will be out of sight until we get far enough away. Besides, I don't like to leave him so far from help, unconscious as he is. Oh, you're getting chicken-hearted, said Appleson with a sneer. However, have your way about it. I wonder what's become of Jake Burke. He was to meet us in Centerford, but he didn't show up. Oh, I shouldn't be surprised if he had trouble in that tramp rig he insisted on adopting. I told him he was running a risk, but he said he had masqueraded as a tramp before. Ah, so he found out. So he has. He's pretty good at it now. Simpson, if you will. Not Simpson. I thought you agreed to call me Featherton, interrupted the chauffeur, turning to Morris and Appleson. Oh, we did. I forgot this lad met us one day and heard me call you Simpson, admitted Morris. Well, Featherton it shall be. But we haven't much time. It stopped raining and the roads will soon be well traveled. We must get away, and if we are to take the lad and his machine to some secluded place, we'd better be at it. No use waiting for Burke. He can look out after himself. Anyhow, we have the model now, and there's no use hanging around Swift's shop, as he intended to do, waiting for a chance to sneak in after it. Appleson, if you and Featherton, will carry young Swift, I'll shove his wheel along to the auto, and we can put it and him in. The two men, first looking through the hole in the shed to make sure they were not observed, went out, carrying Tom, who was no light load. Morse followed them, pushing the motorcycle and carrying under one arm the bundle containing the valuable model which he had detached. I think this is the time we get ahead of Mr. Swift, murmured Morse, pulling his black mustache when he and his companions had reached the car in the field. We have just what we need now. Yes, but we had hard enough work getting it, observed Appleson. Only by luck we saw this lad come in here, or we would have had to chase all over for him, and maybe then we would have missed him. Hurry, Simpson. I mean Featherton. It's getting late, and we've got lots to do. The chauffeur sprang to his seat, Appleson taking his place beside him. The motorcycle was tied on behind the big touring car, and with the unconscious form of Tom in the tonneau beside Morse, who stroked his mustache nervously, the auto started off. The storm had passed, and the sun was shining brightly, but Tom could not see it. End of chapter 14. Well, as they say, that's a fine how do you do. Things are getting a little exciting. We'll see what happens there. Another check-in with the chat room here. How's everybody doing? Good to see folks there. And we're just gonna move on. Maybe we'll get more than 4 chapters in tonight. See how this goes. These have been going by pretty quickly. Alright. Flip back. Flip up. Okay. Previously on Tom Swift and his motorcycle. In chapter 14, Tom got out of the rain with his motorcycle, and turns out those guys in the in the automobile were not good guys. As we kind of all expected, right? So they came back, knocked Tom out, hit him in the head, took the model, took the motorcycle, and were about to dump him somewhere. They didn't want to kill him, so that's good, but they did knock him out. And now, chapter 15, A Vain Search. Several hours later, Tom had a curious dream. He imagined he was wandering about in the polar regions and that it was very cold. He was trying to reason with himself that he could not possibly be on an expedition searching for the North Pole. Still, he felt such a keen wind blowing over his scantily covered body that he shivered. He shivered so hard, in fact, that he shivered himself awake. And when he tried to pierce the darkness that enveloped him And when he tried to pierce the darkness that enveloped him, he was startled, for a moment, with the idea that perhaps, after all, he had wandered off to some unknown country. And that's because it was quite dark and cold. He was in a daze, and there was a curious smell about him, an odor that he tried to recall. Then, all at once, it came to him what it was. Chloroform. Once his father had undergone an operation, and to deaden the pain, chloroform had been used. "I've been chloroformed!" exclaimed the young inventor, and his words sounded strange in his ears. "That's it. I've met with an accident riding my motorcycle. I must have hit my head, for it hurts fearful. They picked me up, carried me to a hospital, and have operated on me. I wonder if they took off an arm or a leg. I wonder what hospital I'm in. Why is it so dark and cold?" As he asked himself these questions, his brain gradually cleared from the haze caused by the cowardly blow, and from the chloroform that had been administered by Featherton. Tom's first act was to feel first of one arm, then the other. Having satisfied himself that neither of these members were mutilated, he reached down to his legs. "Why, they're all right, too," he murmured. "I wonder what they did to me. That's certainly chloroform I smell, and my head feels as someone had sat on it. I wonder." Quickly he put his hands up to his head. There appeared to be nothing the matter with it, save that there was quite a lump on the back where the club had struck. "I seem to be all here," went on Tom, much mystified. "But where am I? That's the question. It's a funny hospital, so cold and dark." Just then, his hands came in contact with the cold ground on which he was lying. "Why, I'm outdoors!" he exclaimed. Then in a flash it all came back to him, how he had gone to wait under the church shed until the rain was over. "I fell asleep, and now it's night," the youth went on. "No wonder I'm sore and stiff. And that chloroform—" He couldn't account for that, and he paused, puzzled once more. Then he struggled to a sitting position. His head was strangely dizzy, but he persisted and got to his feet. He could see nothing and groped around in the dark until he thought to strike a match. Fortunately, he had a number in his pocket. As the little flame flared up, Tom started in surprise. "This isn't the church shed," he exclaimed. "It's much smaller. I'm in a different place. Great Scott, but what has happened to me?" The match burned Tom's fingers, and he dropped it. The darkness closed in once more, but Tom was used to it by this time, and looking ahead of him, he could make out that the shed was an open one, similar to the one where he had taken shelter. He could see the sky studded with stars, and could feel the cold night wind blowing in. "My motorcycle!" he exclaimed in alarm. "The model of Dad's invention! The papers!" Our hero thrust his hand into his pocket. The papers were gone. Hurriedly, he lighted another match. It took but an instant to glance rapidly around the small shed. His machine was not in sight. Tom felt his heart sink. After all his precautions, he had been robbed. The precious model was gone, and it had been his proposition to take it to Albany in this manner. What would his father say? The lad lighted match after match and made a rapid tour of the shed. The motorcycle was not to be seen, but what puzzled Tom more than anything else was how he had been brought from the church shed to the one where he had awakened from his stupor. "Let me try to think," said the boy, speaking aloud, for it seemed to help him. "The last I remember is seeing that automobile with those mysterious men in approaching. Then it disappeared in the rain. I thought I heard it again, but I couldn't see it. I was sitting on the log and, well, that's all I can remember. I wonder if those men—" The young inventor paused. Like a flash it came to him that the men were responsible for his predicament. They had somehow made him insensible, stolen his motorcycle, the papers and the model, and then brought him to this place, wherever it was. Tom was a shrewd reasoner, and he soon evolved a theory which he had afterward learned was the correct one. He reasoned out almost every step in the crime of which he was the victim, and at last came to the conclusion that the men had stolen up behind the shed and attacked him. Now, the next question to settle... Wow, I couldn't speak that line if I wanted to. Let's try that one again. Now, the next question to settle, spoke Tom, is to learn where I am. How far did those scoundrels carry me, and what's become of my motorcycle? He walked towards the point of the shed where he could observe the stars gleaming, and there he lighted some more matches, hoping he might see his machine. By the gleam of the little flame, he noted that he was in a farmyard, and he was just puzzling his brain over the question as to what city or town he might be near when he heard a voice shouting, "Hey, what are you lighting up matches for? You want to set the place afire? Who be you anyhow, a tramp?" It was unmistakably the voice of a farmer, and Tom could hear the footsteps approaching on the run. "Who be you anyhow?" the voice repeated. "I'll have the constable after you in a jiffy if you're a tramp." "I'm not a tramp," called Tom promptly. "I've met with an accident. Where am I?" "Mighty funny if you don't know where you are," commented the farmer. "Jed, bring a lantern until I take a look at who this is." "All right, Pop," answered another voice, and a moment later Tom saw a tall man standing in front of him. "I'll give you a look at me without waiting for the lantern," said Tom quickly, and he struck a match, holding it so that the gleam fell upon his face. "Salt mackerel! It's a young feller!" exclaimed the farmer. "Who be you anyhow, and what you doing here?" "That's just what I'd like to know," said Tom, passing his hand over his head, which was still paining him. "Am I near Albany? That's where I started for this morning." "Albany? You're a good way from Albany," replied the farmer. "You're in the village of Dunkirk." "How far is that from Centerford?" "About 70 miles. "Oh, as far as that? They must have carried me a good way in their automobile," cried Tom. "Was you in that automobile?" demanded the farmer. "Which one?" asked Tom quickly. "The one that stopped down the road just before supper. I see, but I didn't pay no attention to it. If I'd have knowed you fell out, though, I'd have come to help you." "I didn't fall out, Mr. Tom paused. "Blackford's my name. Amos Blackford." "Well, Mr. Blackford, I didn't fall out. I was drugged and brought here." "Drugged? Salt mackerel! But there's a crime committed, then. Jed, hurry up with that lantern and get your deputy's sheriff badge on. There's a drugging and all sorts of crimes committed. I've caught one of the victims. Hurry up. My son's a deputy sheriff," he added by way of an explanation. "Then I hope he can help me catch the scoundrels who robbed me," said Tom. "Robbed you, did they? Hurry up, Jed. There's been a robbery. We'll rouse the neighborhood and search for the villains. Hurry up, Jed." "I'd rather find my motorcycle and a valuable model which was on it than locate those men," went on Tom. "They also took some papers from me." Then he told how he had started for Albany, adding his theory of how he had been attacked and carried away in the auto. The latter part of it was borne out by the testimony of Mr. Blackford. "What I know about it," said the farmer, when his son Jed had arrived on the scene with a lantern and saw his badge, "is that just about supper time I saw an automobile stop down the road a bit. It was getting dusk, and I saw some men get out. Didn't pay no attention to them, 'cause I was busy about the milking. The next I knowed, I seen someone striking matches in my wagon shed, and I come out to see who it was." "The men must have brought me all the way here from the church shed near Centerford to here," declared Tom. "Then they lifted me out and put me in your shed. Maybe they left my motorcycle here also." "I didn't see nothing like that," said the farmer. "Is that what you call one of them two-wheeled lickety-split things that a man sits on the middle and goes like chain lightning?" "It is," said Tom. "I wish you'd help me look for it." The farmer and his son agreed, and the other lanterns having been secured, a search was made. After about a half an hour, the motorcycle was discovered in some bushes at the side of the road near where the automobile had stopped. But the model was missing from it, and a careful search near where the machine had been hidden did not reveal it. Nor did as careful a hunt as they could make in the darkness disclose any clues to the scoundrels who had drugged and robbed Tom. End of chapter 15. All right. We are making great time on this. And we're going to bookmark that there. I'm going to put this back into book view here. Alrighty. And we are going back to the chat room. S1 Fake Thor 2381, Commander Root. Good to see you guys tonight. I really appreciate you being here. Since you guys are in the chat room, I'm going to give you a sneak preview of the title cards that we're going to start using on the videos that we publish to YouTube. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you've already seen it. So here is the title card specifically for Chapter 1 that we're going to be using. Oh, actually, this doesn't have the chapter on it. So these are the title cards we're going to use. So that'll be good. And I'm going to change some of the YouTube stuff. I'm not YouTube, Twitch stuff to show this logo and everything. So that's cool. And with that, I'm going to take that off again. I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. And we will see you on Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Nope, 7 p.m. 7 p.m. To continue on. Have a great evening.